Welcome back to At Home, the podcast. The crew is back together around the table. And you know what, guys? I was thinking about this today. They say Christmas time is the most wonderful time of the year. It's good. All right. This is my favorite time of year. This morning, I got up really early. I put the jeans on, a sweatshirt on. I actually, to my first meeting, wore a stocking hat because it was so cold. Now it's, 1:30, 1:45 in the afternoon. I'm in shorts and flip-flops, and this is the best weather time of the year. What time of year you like?
Well,
is this it?
I do like this weather. Last night, if you sat outside, it was like perfect. And the sky the last couple nights has been like beautiful, like picture perfect. So, yeah, I would agree with you. Like,
fall.
Yeah,
fall's the best. Fall. It's amazing. August, weirdly enough, is probably my favorite month because I know it's technically still summer, but because of everything that's still in front of us. The whole fall is still in front of us. School just got started. Things are kind of winding down for the summer. Yeah, it's my favorite time.
It's a good time.
I think October, November, probably my favorite months. I like when it's
Crisp.
Yeah. And the food that comes in November.
It's about pumpkin spice. It's about pumpkin spice. Everything.
well, they've
season.
already
Seasons
had
go.
it out like last
out.
week or two when you do the grocery shopping.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, my word, it's not even, it's 80 degrees out. I'm not thinking about pumpkin spice, you know.
But it is apple cider season.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, so here's the deal. That's not what we're talking about today. So that was a little impromptu. Angie, what in the world are we covering today?
Well, as we here at Home, the podcast, like to talk about issues that we face in real life. That's kind of what we're doing, kind of plugging on with an eye on discipleship, but also on relationship with others and with God. And so we're going to kind of dissect, I guess I say that because we don't really know the answer to all the things that we're going to talk about today. But how do we handle the cultural moment that we're in right now that is directly associated with social media and platforms and likes and all the things surrounding kind of the digital world? Because I think it's confusing. I think it can be confusing for both parents. It can be confusing for Christians. And it can be also enticing and totally an area. But I also don't want to stop. And I also want to say it can be positive. It can be a positive thing. So it can bring connection and a lot of things that we didn't have, 30 years ago without social media. So let's dive in. Let's kind of talk about like, what was your first experience with social media? And like, do you remember or can you go back to when you like got your first social media? I know Chris you're smiling. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember starting a MySpace account. And then I remember thinking, I don't know how to use it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I got a MySpace account. I never did anything with it.
Yeah.
It's probably still out there. Quite
We
frankly.
need to dig that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See if
Pretty
it
sure
still exists.
you're not going to find anything. Except for probably a profile picture of me from a long time ago.
Right. Mm-hmm. I was late to the game, I think, with Facebook. 2008, I think, is when my profile was officially created. So I just graduated high school and college, and I felt like at the time everybody already had one. And I went back. This is super embarrassing, just looking at some of the first things you posted. And I posted exactly what I was doing. So just like in the room eating pizza was my post, and like who wants to know?
I would have wanted to know that.
Thank you. And so
Where can I find you?
Yeah, right. And so it's just funny to look back at like what you put then versus what you put now. So it just is interesting.
Yeah.
This isn't technically social media, I don't think, but you did this too. MSN Messenger.
Yeah, does that count? Yeah.
I think it counts.
Let's go.
We would get on there and chat with each other. Remember that in real time? It was before
Me and
texting.
you?
No, it wasn't me and you. Yeah, no. You were older,
Oh, yeah.
so more mature. No, I remember getting
He
in
was
my.
too busy posting pizza.
I was eating pizza.
I remember doing the MySpace thing, and I remember thinking how cool it was that you could put your own song on MySpace.
That's right.
And that was sweet. So I had Eminem blaring on my MySpace. It was great. And then I remember Facebook. I actually feel like I joined too early for my age, because it was only college kids when I tried joining, and you were supposed to like confirm your age. I think you had to do it with like your ID or something like that. I don't know how I got around that, but I did. And so I remember having a Facebook before any of my friends did, and I thought it was so lame compared to MySpace. So yeah, that was my experience.
Well, I have to say, where we are at, Chris, like in our age, that it's like a progression. Well, no. I mean, but I can almost see like decade progression. Like when I was in college, we had an email account and we all had to go to the computer lab. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And what I got when I was, first in college was a word processor. And I was living it up when I had a screen in front of me to see what I typed. But if
And AOL would send you the discs that you could.
yeah. So, there's this journey. And then when I graduated college, my parents actually bought me my first cell phone, but it had like an antenna that you lifted. And it was forever. You had to be in like a spot, and it cost buku bucks to pay for any type of phone calls, so it was like emergency only, and then you kind of progress, and later, and I remember, the internet connections at home, that was dial up. And then you go into the next, age, and all of a sudden, now we have these phones. You can do your whole life with a device.
And every once in a while, when I'm sending messages, or you log into something like that, it says data message rates may apply. And I remember thinking, who does that still? Like, who is still paying per message or per number of characters?
Right.
Is that even a thing? It must be, because it's still...
Yeah, it's still out there. But in that, I say that our whole life has been bundled up into a digital world. Would you guys agree with that or disagree?
Yes, I mean, it's everything all in one. I mean, it used to be a time where there was a phone, a radio, a TV, a computer, all separate. And calculator. Yeah, a way to find out what the weather is. I mean, literally everything, all were separate. Now, the fact that you can go to one place, have one device to cover all of those bases is pretty crazy, pretty insane.
And yet it's interesting to me, because I remember living through that whole culture shift of where you had to go to everything. Apple's about ready to come out with a new phone. It sounds like here in the next week or two, they're going to announce it. But everybody's big statements towards this huge announcement is they haven't come up with anything very new lately. And I think it's because, what is new?
Right.
I mean, we've done so much in such a fast time. What do we do now?
Right.
It's going to be interesting to watch this shift over the next few years.
Well, and I think, and I say that, so you're talking about like physical technology hasn't really shifted much, but I want to go to the side of it that our lives itself, our relationships, and how we think and how we choose to live out our lives has shifted so dramatically, I think, over time. And so if you guys could go back and you could say, what is one relationship shift that you've seen in your experience with social media or with the technical world? What is one relationship shift that you see? And I brought this up is I kind of think, I'm more connected to people than I really am, because I just see their lives playing out in social media, or I see posts and they become a friend online, but they're still not a friend, a conversation that I've had with anybody in that list, I would say.
Yeah, I think people have learned a different way to deal with conflict, which is a relationship shift. I can get into that a little bit. But I also think they've found different ways to find allies and people who are like-minded, so groups that they fit in with. And so, yeah, I mean, dealing with conflict is so much easier to share your opinion and your thoughts on something when you're behind a screen. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but so people deal with conflict and in that way confidently. They don't address it in person. They find different people that join their alliance, if you will, Survivor promo there, based off of how many likes or agreements they can foster up on social media. So yeah, I mean, there's groups that you can join that kind of align with your thought processes and your agendas. And we hear some construction happening downstairs.
It's for the listener who might be hearing something in the background. We are under construction still. We're doing quite a major renovation project. And without fail, it's usually pretty quiet until you push record. And so, hey, we're going to press on.
That's our world.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are my thoughts on just relationship shifts.
What about you, Chris? Any relationship shifts you see happen now that, we're living in this digital age compared to, the past 20 years, even in ministry?
Yeah, I don't know how to sum it up. I think Brant said it really well, and I think it's been alluded to around here. I think that relationships, the word I would use is surface. They become more surface than they have depth, and you guys have already alluded to it. I just think we have a lot more. I'm a guy who says, "Oh, they're my friend." Oh, how close of a friend? I don't know. I don't know how many friends I have on social media, but they're my friends. I consider them friends, but do I really have a relationship with them? Probably not. Yeah. So it's a lot of surface.
Yeah. I think just even overall communication, I think if you put two people, face to face that are teenagers now and you try to have them organically have a conversation versus whether it's through texting, drastically different probably looks like, versus if they're in a group setting or just whatever. I think it's interesting just being around students and just listening to them like try to talk in person is funny to me versus what you'll see some of their texting conversations. It just goes on nonstop the entire day. I went on a mission trip with some high school students, and there's about 10 of them that went, and we were in a group chat, the leaders and students, and I rarely participated in the group chat, but like I can tell you that went all hours of the night, just constantly dinging. And it was, but then you'd get them in the van ride when we would actually go on this trip, and it was like dead quiet. So I think just overall communication is just something that's definitely shifted.
But then how do you get to that point where, and as we go through this, that you're not communicating, but yet you're getting validated by what you post or what you communicate through social media? How do we define this as, I guess you could say, as a believer, as a leader, also as a parent? Like, how do you have your children interpret how social media should be handled, how they should handle, followership or likes, or because we discussed this, like how many followers you have on, Instagram, or how long your Snapchat streak is with somebody. There's like a whole validation that comes with this digital world. And how do we navigate that? How do we interpret it?
Yeah. So this is something that like bothers me, but also is something like I truly struggle with, is this idea that self-promotion is such a glorified thing in our culture. And I wrote something the other day on Facebook that said self-promotion is the sin that everybody likes, meaning that you could post your best moments and market your best moments in your family and just what you've achieved or the things that you're out doing, and people will like it or love it or whatever the case may be. And, a good example of that is that you have these people who go out and they help the homeless, right? Have you seen these videos, these reels? And they go up to the guy and they're like, a homeless guy. They might go up and say, "Hey, I need some change or $1." And homeless guy will, say, "Okay," and give him $1 or something like that. And he's like, "Oh, actually, man, because you did that, here's $1,000. And they videotape the whole thing and put it on Facebook. Why? To glorify themselves. And so the act wasn't done in a way, in an act of humility, or even in that $1,000 was a sacrifice. It was all done based off of marketing themselves and creating their influencer lifestyle. And so it really, it bothers me, but I struggle with it too, because, I find myself doing similar things in a smaller scale all the time. And it's been a battle that I've had to personally work through. What's the why behind what I'm doing right now? Is it for self-glorification, or is it to genuinely care for this person or highlight this moment so that I can look back on it? Is it for likes, or is it based off of, just making sure that I'm appropriately sharing my story in an authentic way? So,
Chris, what do you think?
I'm thinking a lot, actually. It's a bit convicting, to be honest with you, because I think sometimes our motives are not as pure. Maybe let me personalize that. Sometimes it is you want to cast an image. It was just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking on generosity and the idea of why. Ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you giving? It goes back to what Brant was just saying. What's your why? Is this for me? Or if nobody knew this was happening, would I still feel that same value? So I think I was sitting there pondering what Brant was saying, and I think that's really wise. The motive behind why we do what we do. I see it a lot in churches. I follow quite a few pastors and I follow quite a few church leaders. And I do think there's this big self-promotion side of things, like our church does this, or, you might belong to a church that does that. And, as all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I go to a church like that. And it's like disparaging this aspect of it. And we see it right now with politics all the time. If your pastor's not doing this, and then all of a sudden, gets followers all wired up, and it's definitely influencing. But what's the motive behind it? Is it actually to build the kingdom, to glorify God, to do whatever? Is it to say, I'm right and you're wrong, and everybody else better come to our place because we're the only ones with a corner on that market? Yeah. So, boy, I could do my own podcast for a half hour on that topic. I got a lot of things I want to say about that.
Can I add something else? So, for instance, like we post a picture, or we take family pictures and we post those online, right? And obviously, like one thing that Francie and I are finding so valuable is the memories that show up on social media.
100%.
And the longer you have it, obviously, the more memories it's going to save and share with you. And so seeing like when Hutch first learned how to ride his bike, and that's only been 3 years ago, but like watching that back is like, oh my word, it reminds us like, don't miss the moment. And so it's like you were saying earlier, Angie, it's it can be a beautiful thing too. It's not purely evil. It can be used for good or for bad, right? Just like anything else. But what we're finding so valuable, Francie and I, in this season is doing life together with other people, like in a small group, for instance, and them seeing the imperfections and them still celebrating us in those imperfections. Or now we can empathize with them because their kids are doing this too. And it's like, oh, we don't have to hide this. Like we actually share this struggle. It's a real thing. And I think that's what, for young parents, I think what social media has done in a bad way is cover up the bad stuff. So that way when you go out in public, you're always stressed about how your kids are behaving. Or when you're in church, you're like worried that, hey, you're going to be too loud, right? And so you're constantly anxious. Like it causes anxiety. Construction's happening right under us right now, by the way. But it's so nice and it's so refreshing when you pull back the curtain a little bit and you allow people in, and it's okay that they're not perfect and they don't smile perfectly for you all the time like they did for that family picture. And I don't know where I was going with that. The construction kind of took me off a little bit, but anyway.
Okay. Well, okay, so I'm gonna talk about this just a second, because I think definitely that we have to be real, and that social media gives us an opportunity to connect across borders. I mean, really, connect across borders, connect across nations, languages. I mean, all of that stuff. Like, we're still able to connect with Nico over in Norway through, Instagram posts and to see what she's doing and all of that things. So I think there's definitely positives. My question, I guess, resonates when you have teenagers And just the other day, we were all sitting around family lunch for Labor Day. My sister has a 14-year-old, and here I have, a 21-year-old. And she's like, how do I balance this? When do you get Instagram? When do you let these things happen? And because this is a real question. And just so you all know, my 17-year-olds, they were asking Mom, when do we get Snapchat? All of those things, because this is like their world. And I think sometimes as adults, Chris and I, we're like in that age that I don't need social media to live my life, but our children and our young, like your kids, I don't even know what they're going to need when they get to be junior hires, when Hutch goes to 6th grade or 7th grade, what's it going to look like? Are they going to, what's their connections going to be? And so I sit there and I really try to think about, how do you form a child into who they are, to make decisions grounded in God's word, grounded with a proper understanding of who they are and made in God's image, that they don't have to look to other people for validation, but yet that is everything that they're living. Everything. The likes on their Instagram post, or their picture isn't good enough to post even on Instagram because they had to take 500 pictures. I mean, this is a real thing. And so I think as parents, I feel it out there that there's this underlying question, like, what do you do with social media? Do you just not do anything because it's so confusing and hard? Or how do you pull back as a parent and say, this is how we're going to control it, but then don't do anything? We're not even going to allow our children because you live under this household. So I'm trying to find the balance. That's a real question.
Right. So in some ways, some of this stuff has been there all along. It's just now it's available in digital format. So I guess you look at like when we were younger and in school, it was this whole FOMO. So if somebody comes to school, like one of my friends comes to school with the new pair of basketball shoes, and then the next day 2 or 3 more of them have those same shoes, of course, what's the draw is going to be, okay, I want to go home and ask Mom and Dad if I can get these shoes. And so you get on social media, and that's a draw is because that's what everybody else is doing. That's what everybody else has. That's where all the fun is being had, is on Snapchat or whatever. And it's so funny because I wouldn't consider myself that old yet, but I already feel like I'm old enough to like not be. Even with like TikTok now is kind of is that even the big one anymore? That was, at least for the last little bit. And I couldn't tell you, anything about what's going on there, or with Snapchat. And so it's like, I'm happy in a way that I'm not necessarily feeling drawn to have to be on those platforms. No. But I know that as our kids get older, they're going to want to feel or be on those because that's where their friends are probably going to be. So how do we not necessarily navigate us, but them? It's going to be tough. It really is, because I think there's just this whole idea of FOMO, that they're going to be missing out, even though they won't necessarily be.
Well, I'll be really honest with you. Like, if you do not have Snapchat, you are left out. Like my children would come home and say, well, I'm left out of that text thread because they only communicate by, Snapchat. I was like, you mean you don't text anymore? You don't have any, they don't have phone calls. And so I say this is that as parents, I think a lot of times we don't know how to help our children because we just not experienced some of that in our time, in our growth, in our, even our interaction with individuals face to face is still happening. Where kids, it's very real in this digital world that they live in.
Do you guys anticipate a course correction? For example, let's take music, church music, right? Because it was hymns, and then it moved into contemporary, and then it moved into really contemporary. And then you start to see a reset starting to take place. Some of the younger generation likes to step backwards a little bit, or whatever the topic. It seems like we have this natural course correction when something gets to the peak of what else can we do, or how much worse can it get, or how much more connected can we be? And then people start, in the generations that follow, say, I don't want to be that. Do you sense like there will be I don't know the answer. Do you think there'll be a course correction in this?
I don't know. I know that it's starting to change a little bit just generationally. Like, even if you look at some of the different platforms, like Facebook's an interesting one right now because there's not as many. I'm kind of taking a shot here. I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's not as many younger people on Facebook as there were initially. Like when Brant was talking about earlier, it was a lot of college kids. That's how it was started. And so now we sit here 20 years later, and it seems like that is not where a lot of the younger people are. And so that's more of, and even Instagram's starting to slowly become phased out a little bit more too. So I think it's not as in one or two spots. I think it's starting to just go in these different, they're starting to just go over different platforms versus it just being all hovered in one or two. But I don't, as far as like course correction or people not wanting to be as engaged, I don't know. I feel like some of the people my age that we know, like, are getting off of it altogether, because I think they're already overwhelmed enough with kids and schedules and life, and they're like, they don't want one more thing to feel like they have to keep up with. And I know, like, that's, I mean, kind of for where I'm at right now, just even on like Instagram, I look back, I think my last post was on the anniversary 2 years ago. So it was like, I'm either really slacking or I don't know. But, and because I think got to a point where I was like, I can't keep up. Like, I feel like I'm, even like a post a day, like I'm behind. Like I just can't keep up with everything. So I'm like, I'm just going to stop for now and just kind of like let life go, and we'll see what happens. But so I don't know. That's where I'm at with it.
I do agree that there has to be a course correction. And I think it's going to happen in this next generation because they're so burnout of being so pushed to have an image, to have a platform that shows like what they're doing. And like, we haven't even talked about like Twitter, and well, it's not Twitter anymore, it's X, but the whole idea is to have a voice, to have, your name out there and known what you're doing or what you believe in or what you stand for. And I do believe that's a good question and a good thought process, that do we get to that point where we say enough is enough and we pull back?
What would you say to parents then, Angie?
Well, for one thing, as a parent of the older teenagers and college kids, I would say and this is what I told my sister, and I'm telling my own family this, so I guess I could tell it on the podcast. You never want to be a parent that doesn't allow their child to struggle. And in that struggle should happen when they're in your home. And I think sometimes we get so bent out of shape that we say, well, my kid's not going to date until they're 21 or 30 or whatever, or my kid's not going to have social media till they're 18 or 25, or Justin says like 40. No, anyways, what I'm saying is that why not live with your kid and do life and help them navigate versus be the avoidance factor? Because the thing is, it's really not avoidance. It's actually just putting off the problem, and it will happen sometime in some way. And maybe some kids, there are some really good kids out there that follow the rules and allow, they don't want to break anything and they don't want to do anything wrong. And, but there's always going to be this enticement of, what if I try this, or what do I want to, and how do I balance it? How do I do my homework at college and keep up with all the stuff going on in my text feed? Or do I go out and, experiment because I haven't had anything? And so I think you have to learn to help kids understand all the dangers that exist as well. And so you can do that when they're in your home. That would be my advice. I'm not saying there's an age. I mean, an age of understanding is important.
Probably another way to say it is a maturity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would not, if you look at the stats out there, I would not give my kid Instagram or Facebook before 15. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but 14, 15, when they enter that high school age, there is definitely a positive getting them through junior high without social media. But I don't know if that's even possible anymore with how people communicate and how even coaches and other things happen. But that's a great age, because at least they can process a little bit more with you. So what are your thoughts, Brant, being in the classroom and in the school systems?
I'm so far out of it now. 2 years, Angie.
I know, so far.
I don't even have respect among my teacher peers anymore. No, I don't know. Something I wrote that it kind of ties it all back, right? So we're talking about this whole idea of self-promoting, right? And how there's negative effects and there's positives that can come from social media, but when our heart is on this idea of endorsing ourselves, that's where we can kind of get sticky. And so something I wrote, in that post on Facebook that kind of goes along with this is, we often equate worth with visibility and success. We often equate worth with visibility and success with self-promotion. And so the idea there is, most of these kids are finding their worth in making themselves visible, in branding themselves. And so you can't do that as well on Facebook, not in these kids' eyes. You're starting not to be able to do it as well on Instagram. Can't do it as well on Twitter. You can voice your opinions on Twitter and X, whatever you want to call it, which gives you some sort of platform. The reason TikTok is taken off is because you can literally brand yourself. You can brand yourself with music, with dance moves. You can.
Go.
Yeah, Chris Knight knows all about that. Basically, it becomes an art platform. Like, I'm an artist, and it could be in a way that's, for young people in seductive ways. You could idolize, different figures on there because of their content, influencers, right? Who are doing nasty things, but it's fun, quote unquote, to watch. And so there's that visibility aspect, right? And they equate that with their worth, right? And then the success is based off of their self-promotion. Are people liking? Your title of your blog here talks about likes, image, and platform, right? Are people liking and loving what I'm posting? And that's where I find, validation in my success. Am I a successful person? Well, if more people are liking my stuff, then I must be successful. I'm worthy if I'm visible to people. But then I said it's crucial to remember that following Jesus calls us to a different way, right? And that way is living in humility and finding your worth in who Jesus says you are, and not needing the world to validate you and other people to see you to where you're lifted up, but rather see Christ through you.
And I 100% support all of that. And I share this to those parents who are sitting there struggling with their kids saying, well, I need this, or I have this problem, because at that moment in time when you don't feel that there's an answer to how to walk with your children through a hurt and heartache that comes through social media, through a bad text, or through being left out, I share that that's the moment that you have to ask for discernment, for understanding and wisdom, to allow God to show them who He is. Because I think sometimes we can't rescue them. We can't rescue them from it. And I guess a lot of times we try to rescue our children from the pain and say, well, it will get better if you just don't do it. Just take them off, or just isolate yourself and don't have a relationship with that person. It is definitely an option. But I say that is that why not walk and allow your kid to struggle through the opportunity to how to navigate a hard relationship, or someone who said something, how to have a conversation with that person face to face and do the things the right way. And that's just one thing I said as a parent through social media in these last couple years, that we're not going to get this right all the time, but let's not get it totally wrong, and fail at all by just avoiding it.
So much of this conversation surrounds the topic of identity and what is our identity? Where does our identity come from? My challenge and encouragement to parents and to those of you who are struggling with this, even as adults, don't forget where your identity is found. Our identity is found in Jesus Christ, in that relationship. And getting ready to speak on Sunday about the fact that we can only genuinely follow one thing at a time. Who are we ultimately following? And we're called to follow Jesus. And so my challenge as you navigate this topic is make Christ the center and follow Him. Let your identity be found in Him. And that, I think, goes back to the motive. What is my motive for this? Who am I promoting? What am I promoting? So to the listener, again, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Hopefully you found some benefit in it. If anything, hopefully it sparked a conversation maybe within your own household on how are you going to handle this topic of cultural moments of likes and images, and what platforms and how all this is playing itself out in our world today. We are here to help you. Walker's Missionary Church exists, and I would be without fail to say there are a lot of great churches, right? Because we were just talking about self-promotion. There are a lot of great ministries around our area. One thing that we are blessed with here in Northern Indiana is a lot of great churches to be a part of. We encourage you, find yourself a place to belong. Find yourself a place to grow along other believers and be held accountable, encouraged to grow. And if we can help you here at Walk Through Some Missionary Church, we'd be happy to walk with you on that journey. Until the next conversation, we ask the Lord's blessing on your life and let you know that we are here for you. Until next time, thanks for joining us.